Hey everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the interview series. And today we have with us John Neffinger, who is a communications strategist and a coach and a co-author of the book Compelling People. So, John, is there anything that I left out that you'd like to let the audience know about yourself?
Oh goodness. It's a long story, but certainly everything you said, that's on point. Can leave it right there.
Okay, so having said that, just for the as the audience may not know, what exactly is a communications strategist?
That's a great question, and I got to say, it's not just myself, but a lot of people I know in this business, if you can call it that, or people who move through the world with that title, have a lot of trouble communicating what it is they do exactly, because it can be a wide range of things. Obviously, we all communicate day in, day out, every day. We supposedly employ some kind of strategies to get what we want, so it's a little bit vague. Communication strategist, in my case, means somebody who gets hired to help people communicate more effectively. It's usually people who are speaking in public, whether they're a spokesperson or a pundit, or they're a candidate, or they're running a company. And so my job is to help them figure out how to get the results that they want when they're standing up in front of people. This actually goes to one of the kind of core themes of the book, which is that we don't know ourselves very well, by and large. This whole, and I think it's early on in the book that we mentioned this, but it's something that we find ourselves. When I use the royal we, I have my co-author Matt Kohut, and it's sort of a merry band of people that we work with. And one of the things that we reflect on a lot is that people who spend a few minutes in our company, anybody who spends a few minutes in our company, generally is going to walk away from that encounter with a clearer idea of how we present ourselves to the world than we have, because we just don't spend a lot of time watching video of ourselves and all the little mannerisms, the nonverbal things that we do unconsciously have a huge effect on how people perceive us.
Wow, so basically, you're as a communication strategist, you try to get people to become more aware of their presence.
Yes, that is definitely a part of it. The caveat to that is that when we do this kind of work with people, it's, even though oftentimes we're in a professional setting, there's a very discreet, they want to land the sale, win the proposal, that kind of thing. There's a very concrete goal that they're after. The fact is, what we're talking about is very personal to each and every one of us, and so one of the sort of maxims that my colleagues and I adopted early on, when we were still just trying to figure out whether we could even do this kind of thing for a living, was the old physician edict: first do no harm. And what that means in this case is, if somebody does something really weird, then you have to think a little bit about whether there's some chance that they could be able to affect that, or whether you want to just sort of point them to how to work around that and understand it maybe a little bit. Because what you can do when you go down this rabbit hole, if you're only working with somebody for a limited amount of time, for instance, then you can get people really self-conscious about stuff. This is stuff that reflects deeply on who we all are, how the rest of the world treats us. And so you have to tread carefully in this terrain a little bit. But yes, generally, a little bit of that awareness is very important. And on the other side, trying to figure out how to coax people to behave in ways they wouldn't otherwise necessarily naturally, subconsciously time in that situation. And so when we're doing coaching kind of work, one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is identifying situations in which the person that we're working with is at ease and relaxed and demonstrative, and really it feels like genuinely who they are, and are not too self-monitoring. And if we can coax them to behave that way in a situation where they might otherwise be much more reserved, or have other kind of self-sabotaging behaviors, that's usually a good thing. Now, you still have to be careful what you say. So there are reasons why people are careful about what they communicate in high-stakes situations, but the way they communicate it, the actual sort of demeanor piece of the puzzle is usually much more effective. It's usually much more effective what they're doing in some other situation somewhere else in their life. We see this a lot when we're doing active coaching work with people. So for instance, if somebody's doing a big speech, you might tape record it, and then we can watch it back, and this goes to your point about self-awareness, right? What we will often do, we've developed a little trick along the way, which is to make a big show of reaching for the camera as if to turn it off and leaving it running. And one of the reasons for that is that oftentimes when people think the camera is off, they suddenly behave very charmingly, very winningly, as opposed to this wooden, stiff demeanor that they adopted as soon as they thought the camera was pointed at them. So it's nice to capture that and show people the contrast oftentimes.
That's amazing. I would have never thought that there's communication strategists such as yourself who coach people on how to bring out the best light of themselves. So that's very interesting. And so you said you do coaching. I'm guessing you coach your clients to do just as you said. You teach them how to be aware, teach them how to present themselves in a specific manner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's different. So we're not trying to make everybody into the same, fit everybody into the same mold. But yeah, we're trying to basically change their attitude or their approach, kind of where their head is at.
Okay.
So that in the moment when it matters, in front of whatever audience it might be, they're going to do something different than they would have done before.
Okay.
There are all kinds of internal, it's not contradictions, but at least tensions in this work. So we don't want people thinking about what they're doing with their hands when they're trying to have an important conversation with somebody. We want them thinking about what they're saying and trying to process information, paying attention to the reaction they're getting, not paying attention to what kind of gestures they're making. And so those gestures do matter, but to the degree that we can get them on autopilot somehow by changing their attitude, that's going to be more effective. The other thing, and this again gets back more to the book in terms of the internal tensions, just like we were talking about a second ago, understanding everything that you do naturally may or may not be helpful to getting you to do it better if it creates or raises all kinds of anxieties for you, and that those anxieties then become what you're experiencing in the moment when we want you to be experiencing total confidence in who you are and what you're saying, right? Okay. Same is true of the book. That tension, it finds its way into the book. It was very interesting for us when we published the book. We already knew from all the work that we'd done with various people, lecturing at Harvard and being asked to teach at other fancy schools and working with very high-level political figures and media figures and coaching TED Talks and all this. We knew we had something good there. When we put it all down on paper and it was shipped out into the world, and we didn't put it all down on paper, but what's interesting is that tension very much surfaced in that the book breaks down a lot of stuff, and obviously the book can't see you in particular and tell you what you're doing, but the book talks about a lot of kinds of issues, different kinds of issues that people have, and it's essentially unpacking them. There are chapters looking in minute terms not only at nonverbal behavior but at facial structure and things, and considering those in lights that hadn't often, if ever, been considered even by academics in those fields before, in terms of what kinds of impressions that they are. The problem with that was that made some people nervous. So reading, some of the reviews of our book, we got a lot of fantastic reviews from people to whom it spoke to where they're at, where they wanted to be. The negative reviews tended to be people who were reacting to that in a personal way, like we're deconstructing this stuff, and the sort of assumption was that that they didn't actually read, it seemed, maybe the whole book, because if you read the whole book, we contextualize that, we explain there's a reason we're doing this, and please don't take this in a personal way that's going to mess you up, and here's some other ways that you can move forward. But a lot of people got really, I think, triggered is one way to think of it, by delving deeply into the particulars of the mechanics of how it is that we make impressions of people. That's uncomfortable stuff for people, and it's very legitimately uncomfortable stuff for people. It's just, if you want to take the time to deal with that, it's also very useful to understand how that stuff works.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And for yourself, John, how did you get started, or how did you all begin from, I guess, from starting out to the creation of this book?
Right. Well, I got to say, everybody involved in this, well, it's not just everybody involved in this has history thinking about this and thinking about how they're perceived in the world. Who doesn't think about how they're perceived in the world and why that is, and why is it different from that other person, whether that other person is, regarded as more fun than they are, can tell a better joke, or less fun. And why is it, you have empathy for somebody who seems like a nice enough person but just doesn't get that kind of reaction. And so this is the water we swim in. And so to some degree there's an inherent interest in how this stuff works. Professionally, the way this came about was that my colleagues and I were working in politics. And what we were finding was that in the American context, we had the kind of Democratic Party, which was all very policy heavy sort of proposals and whatnot, and the Republican Party, which has its policy views but doesn't lead with those so much, and oftentimes, is less than fully direct about those, but they are much better oftentimes at connecting with folks. And so we happen to have Democratic clients who were wondering, why is this, and why aren't people, I'm trying to be all helpful to them, and why aren't they supporting me, kind of thing. And so that fundamental mystery led us to try and figure out if there's something that we could do to at least understand, if not help people navigate that better. Now, we've branched out a lot since then. We have a lot of different kinds of clients and a lot of different kinds of industries. But that kind of fundamental mystery that we see where this one tribe, that the Democrats, is all about their ideas and their great policy and how it's going to help everybody. It's going to be great. And the Republican Party talks a lot more about cultural stuff, and it speaks to people in a way, historically at least, that most Democrats didn't manage to match. And so it's shifted a little bit. We'd like to have, there's some cases where we've had something to do with that. But a lot of people involved in those particular worlds think that's mostly about the words, and the words do matter. But there's a lot more to it, and so it's that nonverbal piece that we really became experts in, and that led to the discovery of the big idea of the book, and the big idea of the book being the way that we judge each other. And in some ways, I'm going back to this kind of reviews and whatnot, and what when people are rubbed wrong or have been rubbed wrong by the book, what's that about? We spent, as authors do and publishers do, we spend a lot of time thinking about what the title of this thing should be, right? So what do we call it? There's a big idea at the center. The big idea is strength and warmth, which we'll get to unpacking in a moment. But nobody really wanted that to be the title. Like, what does that even mean? Whatever. And we ended up with compelling people. And there's sort of a double entendre there, right? It's the idea is that some people are compelling, and this is about how to compel people, which always brings to mind for me like cattle prods or something unpleasant. But really what this book explains that has not been explained before, at least for a lay audience. There's been this renaissance of study and understanding around this over the last 10 or 15 years in the academy. But this is the first book that lays out for a general reader, for a general audience, how it is that people judge each other. How do people judge you? How do you judge other people? What are we looking for? And if there's a lot to talk about there. Obviously, it's a long book that explores how that works, sort of basically, but then different facets of that. But in addition to that, there's a piece that the book only begins to touch on, which is frankly how we see ourselves. because we judge each other by these same criteria that we use on other people and other people use on us. So if there's a sequel hiding somewhere, I think that's what it is. It's probably time that we talk about the main idea now. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's very fair. You said you talked about strength and warmth. Please dive in more.
Elaborate, right? Okay.
About that.
Yeah, sure. So actually, one interesting way to explain this is how we got there. When we were working with public speakers, what we found was that most public speakers had one of two problems. Either they were at pains to show their audience how nice they were, almost apologizing for taking up their time in the front of the room. And they would smile, and they would be self-deprecating, and they would be just super ingratiating to the audience, to the point where you wanted them to be in charge of the room a little more. You were almost, as being in their audience, you're almost nervous for them, like they weren't feeling confident out there. The other bucket was folks who were so intent on what they were saying, so entirely focused on what they were saying, that there was no relational piece to what they were saying at all. There was no interaction with the audience. There was no human connection there. It was all the material, all the time, and they were very serious about that. And that gets the job done in a bunch of professional settings. That's absolutely fine. But it missed out on the opportunity to convey to people why they were somebody that there was a connection with, why you should be listening to them, that they actually had the audience's best interests in mind. And so we were noticing this, that the advice, like in some cases the advice over here, the advice is, stand up straight and finish a sentence with a period and pause like you mean it. Give it some emphasis. And over here, the advice was a lot, would you crack a smile once in a while? It was right, you're just bumming it. And it's more to it than that. But there was a lot of that on either side. And from that, we began to develop this lay theory that some people projected a lot of strength but not a lot of warmth, and some people projected a lot of warmth and not a lot of strength. And sure enough, by keeping up with the social science literature, we figured out there were folks who were seeing this in the academy too. They had slightly different words for this. Warmth was actually exactly the same word. That one of the things that people were using to judge each other on was warmth, and the other they called competence rather than strength. And strength, it's important for us to note, does not mean how much you can bench press. It's somebody's physically imposing, that projects a form of strength, and that counts. But it's more than that. It's your ability to bend the world around you to your will, to get stuff done. And so that competence piece, competence is a good word for it, but it's a little bloodless. And folks who are just hyper competent, but don't display a willfulness or a determination, that sort of emotional energy piece to strength, are missing something. And so we use the word strength so that it includes both your strengths in terms of a competence sense, but also a strength of determination and of forcefulness. So there's that bucket. Then there's the warmth, which I guess since we both landed on the same word, is probably more self-evident, but it's a relational. Are you relatable? Are you like me or friendly, or is there some empathy flowing back and forth? Do you care about the same things that I do? Do you want the world to look the same way? And that's one way to think about this from a very primitive, like, why would these be the things that we judge each other on? Well, because there are two very important things to know. When you meet somebody new, you want to know, are they on my team? Do they want the world to look the same way I do? And do they have the power to make the world look the way they want it to, right? Whether that's the way I want it to look or not, right? Because if they seem like they can bend the world around them to their will, I'm in that world around them, and I don't like what they want to have happen, then that's a problem. And so you get a fear reaction to somebody like that. And this is what you see. You have these two, strength and warmth, And depending on how much or how little somebody projects of each one of those, that very much shapes how the people judging them react emotionally to them. So if somebody projects a lot of warmth and not a lot of strength, you're going to pity them, really, because you care about them, right? Mm-hmm. Because that warmth is relational, but you feel bad for them because they're completely unable to get it done. They have the kick me sign on the back. That's kind of a lovable loser situation. So somebody projects a lot of strength but not a lot of warmth, they're going to get it done, and I'm not going to like the results. I fear that person, right? Because they're going to mess up my world. The people who project neither, we don't have much regard for at all, that we really admire, that's the folks who manage to do both at once. And where this gets really interesting, and this is where this central idea is not just, well, there's this one thing and there's this other thing, and you combine them and that shows you how we emotionally react to each other. What's tough is that it's hard to do both of these things at once. When you pursue a strength strategy in life, you're the bull in the china shop. You make things unpleasant for people when they don't do it your way. You can get far that way. A lot of people get far that way. They won't be loved for it, but they will get their way a lot of the time if they're smart about it. On the other hand, if you pursue the love strategy, sort of warmth strategy, right? I'm gonna make people like me because I'm gonna be solicitous of them, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna assert myself very much. I'm sort of hoping somebody takes care of you, and that's a strategy in life too. And pursuing more of one or more of the other, making people be nice to you, and or making them get the heck out of your way. You can do either. But the more you pursue a strength strategy, the less warm you look, because the more you look like a chicken. And on the other hand, the more you pursue a warmth strategy, the more you look like a pushover, because you're never going to assert yourself. And so it is the rare individual who projects. I mean, most of us manage to figure out how to project a little bit of both, unless we're going all strength all the time, all warmth all the time. But it's the rare individual who projects a lot of both at once. Those are the people who we use words like charisma, and they're magnetic, and we have all these sort of semi-magical terms for what that effect is that they create by doing both at once. And some people do that just by what they do in the world. I think Nelson Mandela is probably the primo example of somebody who totally remade his country, but on behalf of the downtrodden, right? So that downtrodden part is the warmth. He's not just the champion for himself; he's the champion for his people. And obviously, it took a lot of charisma for him to get that done, but it also took him putting up with being in prison for a long time and becoming a symbol, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So his resume reads charisma. For most of us, and most of the people who are regarded as having, being particularly compelling and charismatic, it's not just about your deeds. It's about how you carry yourself in the world. It's about you reassuring your fellow human being by not only being confident in the face of the human condition, but by being empathetic towards them, by not just it being all about you, but by sharing that with other folks too. And fucking them up and instilling that confidence in others.
Yeah.
That ended version of it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you talked about in your book. And so, for individuals, would you say they should always strive to get that balance of strength and warmth?
It's a great question, and I think there is a philosophical level on which the answer is absolutely yes. I can't make the claim that it's the only way to succeed if by success you're measuring just in some material way. We've seen that, right? You just look around. There are plenty of people who either luck into stuff or who bull their way into stuff. But you got to question the value of that stuff too. I think ultimately, and this goes to that what I was saying before, is like the T's, right? How we look at ourselves. strength and warmth is very interesting, and when you think about that in terms of how we look at ourselves, because we are naturally inclined to give ourselves a break. We are empathetic with ourselves, and so we don't feel like we have to work as hard to be sympathetic to ourselves, even though there are plenty of people who don't like themselves because they've internalized other criteria for good reasons or bad, and hold themselves up to their standards and find themselves wanted. So that's why you get a lot of people who are just all strength, who have enough in terms of their self-regard. They see themselves as tough. They look for external validation of that, and then they're relatable to themselves, so that's warm enough for them. I think that if you want to be if you look at other psychological theories like self-actualization or becoming, in literature, a man in full, I'm just drawing from a couple of different cultural reference points, that to be happy and satisfied with who you are and the life you've lived at the end of the day, it is very helpful to do both. It's helpful to stand up for yourself and to insist on getting the things you want and to achieve externally, for sure. That's definitely helpful. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C., where people very much judge themselves and others by their sort of career achievements and success. But on the other hand, having human connection beyond one's own narcissistic world is a very enriching thing on lots of different levels. And I think without that, we're missing a lot of what the human experience has to offer. And I think it's folks who put those both together. Frankly, the reason that that's magnetic is because we who maybe are not at that point see people like that, and you think, that's awesome. I wish I felt like that. I wish I felt the way that person's nonverbal signals tell me they're feeling. Right? That they're confident, that they're comfortable, that they feel empowered. They're not cowering before the world around them, like they're projecting that strength. But they're also confident and strong enough to be generous with others. That it's not all about them. They're not miserly. So I think there's something not just compelling or magnetic or heady about that combination that then allows you to achieve external stuff. I think that there's something about that condition that we're all trying to achieve for ourselves as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Very, very compelling.
I know. This stuff sounds great. Where do I get it? Well, buy the book right now. Well, hopefully that is certainly a lot of what the book talks about, is in detail some of the things that stand between us and that. And I think, again, going back to the kind of folks who read it and did not come away feeling empowered, I think that the thankfully small minority, but nevertheless notable readers who came away feeling disempowered by the book because it unpacked all the mechanics of this. There's this issue of authenticity and being genuine and feeling confident that I think the book is an invitation to a process that leads there. But it's a process that's a longer road for some than for others, depending on the hand the world has dealt them. And there's a big section of the book called The Hand You're Dealt. And for better or worse, that's what you got to play. And I say that as someone who's incredibly aware of the hand that I'm dealt in terms of what society values. I had it super easy. I am a straight white dude in America whose parents got him a good education and went to a high status university. I know plenty of other people in that same boat because I know plenty of people around me who have been dealt pretty much that same hand. It's all gone wrong for them. So that is not an automatic thing by any means. But I do think that there are a whole host of other obstacles that other people face that I haven't. Now, it's also true that people who face other kinds of obstacles also grow from those experiences, and they develop and they get a perspective on life that somebody who has it easy doesn't necessarily. And so I think we all have our own roads to walk, and we're all on different stages along the way on those roads.
Yeah, very profound words. I love it.
I'm trying.
And so for yourself, would you say, how about yourself? How would you judge yourself on the strength and warmth scale?
Yeah, I mean, I have, like I was mentioning before, I carry with me a lot of traditional, societally recognized strength signals. I have a bunch of suits, and I put them on, and I button up my collar, and I put on a tie, and I walk out, and I'm like the tall guy with the and the suit and whatever. That's a different thing than if I were actually still athletic, which I once was, but that's a long time ago now. That has a different kind of strength to it. And I speak pretty good, right? Because I'm a communications consultant. Because this is my job. So there are lots of strength pieces that I almost can't shake, right? Yes, I could not wear the suit, but although in certain professional contexts that would raise a whole bunch of other questions. So for me, a lot of my communication, a lot of the things that are in my control, as opposed to the hand I'm dealt, a lot of the things, the dials that I can turn are, yes, I want to maintain my strength. I want to speak with confidence and authority about the points that matter that I want to have come across. But a lot of the rest of the time, I'm dialing those dials towards warmth, so that people don't see me as that stuck up Ivy League jerk kind of thing, right? Which again has some benefits to it in terms of being seen as strong and confident, whatever. But that's not what I want. I would rather be relatable in the world. I would rather be a nice guy than be that other kind of guy. And for me, I can absolutely recognize influences my childhood that pointed to that. Being raised a certain way in my family being professionally geared towards community service. The moment when a guy who had played on my Little League baseball team for a long time found out that I was going to this fancy Ivy League school and made some snide remark about, "Oh, I didn't know you were rich," which communicated to me in a very profound way the negative associations attached to some of these high status things that I was wandering into. So we all have these dials that we can turn one way or the other, and so being aware of some of those lets you make those choices in a way that you're not going off the deep end on either strength or warmth, but you're adjusting for both.
Okay, well, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, no, that's I didn't think it could get so deep and so methodical and kind of really well thought out. Yeah, I love it. And so
there's a lot going on there. It's true. Even though even when oftentimes you're in a chapter on, like, I don't know what, bone structure or how people ask each other out on dates, and it doesn't seem like the meaning of life is at stake. It's lurking there, not too far beneath the surface, I promise you.
Yeah.
Sorry to ask a question.
I know, absolutely. I was just about to say it. Prior to reading the book, I would have never thought about that consciously. I always knew that subconsciously, or just somehow we'd be processing those sort of things in our minds. But you took what we were all thinking out onto into your book, and you kind of lay out the framework of everything that you can think of, from your clothing to your face to your race, your gender, just everything. So I love reading your book and just how you explicitly lay everything out.
Well, that's the reaction we were hoping for, that kind of systematizing it. It appeals to some personalities more than others, I guess. You're our intended audience in that regard. That it's cool to understand all of this stuff and how it's working. It's, for some people are going to find some of that disturbing too, and I totally understand that as well. But it is sort of this forbidden fruit of knowledge that explains so much about the social interactions that we go through every day. That it seemed worth writing down. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just people feel that it's perhaps they feel that it's they don't like to be seen as someone who can be studied, or maybe they feel like it's, oh, how dare you get into my mind and study me.
Yeah, I think that's right. And externally, there is a part of the book that's reducing us to the sum of our parts and social cues. And we don't mean to stop there. There's a lot more to the story, but we do stop to look at those social cues and what they add up to, because that is an important part of how we're judged in the world, because people don't take the time to get to know us all the time. They use shortcuts and stereotypes, and so we're trying to unpack the mechanics of that just to understand it a little better, again, to know what it is you're working with. If there's one thing that after reading the few, you got a whole lot of 5 stars and then a couple of 1 stars. If there's one thing, though, that I think after reading the critical reviews stuck with me, it goes back to that debate about the title, which is that there may be a different way. I don't know that the clever double entendre was false advertising, but there might have been a way to make clear what it is that this book is about. This book is about how people see you, or how we judge each other, if you want to take it out of the personal realm. That's what it's about. It's how we size each other up, and that has a lot of implications, and it has a lot of ugliness to it, because that's how the world works. We all know that there's a lot of ugliness to that, and stereotyping, and not giving people the benefit of the doubt. And so, yeah, we go into that for sure.
Yeah. Great. And so for yourself, if you could tell yourself 3 things to your 20-year-old self, what would those 3 things be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Going back, I'm a guy who doesn't have a ton of regrets in terms of how I live my life, and a lot of that is honestly because I was dealt a pretty good hand, and I have my parents to thank for that, and whatever else. But I do think that if I went back to the time before I understood this kind of stuff explicitly, I have a lot of opinions about things I was wearing and things I was doing. So, for instance, I have, and it's interesting now because we're doing this Skype interview. One of the things that I know, I do television interviews from time to time as well, and so one of the pieces of self-knowledge that I have come to acquire the hard way over the years, and when I say the hard way, I mean by watching video of myself back, which is nobody's idea of a good time, let me tell you.
I agree with you 100%.
If I'm not thinking about how I'm carrying myself, it's not thinking about it actively, but if I haven't made the kind of attitudinal adjustment, and I'm just kind of going along through my day, I will often answer questions with a lot of head tilting back and forth, and I'll say, well, on one hand, and it's this funny bobble-headed effect, right? That I would never be aware of, except that I saw it on video, and I sort of gulped hard and said, oh my God, did I just do that on national television? And sure enough, I had. And so that might have been, the kind of thing to pay attention to. One of the strange nonverbal cues that we pick up on, and now you see I'm lifting my hands in the frame because it matters a lot. There is a layperson's term, poise, and you can actually measure what about the quality of gestures adds up to poise. And people who are kind of more loosey-goosey in the way they carry themselves, and they'll jut one hip out, and they'll be asymmetrical, and that has a very casual connotation to it. And it's warm. It says, I'm comfortable with you. It does not project a lot of strength. Whereas people who move, it's not that they don't move, but there's poise and there's sort of a stillness that punctuates particular gestures. In between this gesture and this gesture, I am still. And then I'm going to move very deliberately to a different gesture. It's almost like ballet or martial arts, and it denotes control of my body in space, a lot of right angles. That projects a lot of strength to the point where somebody who has excessive amounts of this kind of poise in their body movements can be really creepy and unnerving, frankly. And that I'm way over on the like loose-limbed part of that spectrum, and that's the kind of thing that if I'd been aware of, I probably would have carried myself differently in different situations back in the day before I was thinking about this too much.
So basically, you wish you knew all the stuff that you knew now. And
yeah, no, there are definitely little tricks and things that would have been handy. It would have come in handy soon.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. It's I think there's that saying, we are too soon old, or I'm butchering the quote, but it's more or less.
Yeah, no, but I know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. It's always, I wish I had known that. Oh, if only I had known that.
Yes, right, exactly. Well, and there's also the youth is wasted on the young thing, right? If you'd known what you knew when you were older back in the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any one of those quotes.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much. Just before we finish off, what are some things for yourself? Are you working on another book? Is that in the works, or?
That's a fantastic question. I've been working with a lot of clients over the past couple of years. A lot of TV-focused clients doing less corporate work, more TV-focused work. I have a couple of kids at home now, and I'm thinking about downshifting a little bit, maybe thinking about that next book. I'm not working on it yet, but I do miss writing, and I think there's some more things needing to be said, maybe following on compelling people that bear revisiting. So watch this space. Don't hold your breath, but could be.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited for Compelling People Part 2.
Part 2, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Probably or not, but it may well be that. We will see.
Either way, I'm sure it'll be quite a great read.
Well, I appreciate the confidence.
And so just before we end, how can the viewers connect with you? How can they reach out to you? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's the book, and there's an associated website. It's compellingpeople. I want to say it's .com, but it might be .org. I'm not totally sure.
Okay.
And there's fun stuff on there as well. My other half, my co-author Matt Kohut, does most of the upkeep on that, so he'll be mad at me for not knowing exactly the URL. That said, you can also reach out to both of us. I'm John at knpcommunications.com, and he's Matt at knpcommunications.com. And so absolutely start with the book, but if that leaves you with, whether it's a casual question or whether it's wanting to go deeper down that road with a more active guide, absolutely reach out to us. We're always happy to hear from our readers, whether it's stories or questions or wanting more. Absolutely. Please get in touch. Yeah,
for sure. And for the audience members, I'll be leaving a link down below in the description on where you can contact John and his partner or purchase the book. But thank you very much, John, and thank you so much for your time. You spouted out so much knowledge and golden nuggets, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate that. It's a rich vein here, and it's fun to get to talk about it too. There is something weird about the whole exercise of writing a book about nonverbal communication and all this other stuff, rather than doing this kind of exchange, which allows for a much more human and real interaction. So thank you for making that possible.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again, John.